I want you to try something really simple for me right now, wherever you are. I just want you to snap your fingers
Okay.
just once. Ready? Snap. Now, in the exact time it took you to do that, like in that tiny, tiny fraction of a second, something inside you was born and then died over 1 trillion times.
Yeah, which is just, I mean, it defies human comprehension.
It really
The
does.
sheer scale of that number, when you apply it to our internal state, it forces us to just completely rethink what a single moment actually even is.
Right, because it completely shatters my scientific intuition. Like
Mhm.
1 trillion times.
Yeah.
That is a 1 followed by 12 zeros.
It's a massive number.
It is. And so the mission for this deep dive today is to really trace the origin of this mind-bending statistic. We're looking at a collection of ancient Buddhist texts called the Abhidhamma Pitaka.
Which were written, what, roughly 2,500 years ago?
Exactly, about 2,500 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're taking those ancient claims and laying them right alongside modern neuroscience and philosophy. We are trying to understand the terrifying speed of the human mind.
And the core tension here, I think, is bridging that staggering gap, both chronologically and technologically.
Yeah.
You have this 2,500-year-old tradition arriving at a metric of mental speed that actually rivals, and in some cases even surpasses, modern computational frequencies.
See, and that is where my skepticism immediately goes on high alert. Because 1 trillion times per finger snap, that is faster than the clock speed of a high-end modern computer CPU.
Right.
Within the parameters of just normal human perception, it's operating on a timescale that challenges the speed of light. I mean, ancient humans obviously didn't have equipment to measure microseconds,
Definitely.
let alone nanoseconds or picoseconds.
Yeah.
They didn't have atomic clocks sitting around. So we're looking at a claim that suggests someone basically sat under a tree and accurately calculated a trillionth of a second using absolutely nothing but their own nervous system.
Right, and skepticism is entirely required here. I mean, you have to push back on that because the texts don't claim this was calculated mathematically, in the way a modern physicist would sit down and map out a particle's decay.
Okay, so how do they claim they figured it out?
They point to a state of profound meditation. It's called Jhana.
Jhana, right.
Yeah, and it's framed not as a math equation, but as a direct observation, an observation that's only made possible by this highly advanced alteration of consciousness. So our task today is really to figure out if this trillion-fold metric is a literal, observable, natural truth.
Or maybe a deep psychological illusion.
Exactly, an illusion, or perhaps a phenomenon that materialistic science simply lacks the tools to measure right now.
Right, but, just saying, oh, they meditated really deeply doesn't solve the math problem for me at all.
Sure.
Like, sitting quietly with your eyes closed and taking some deep breaths doesn't suddenly grant you the biological ability to perceive nanoseconds. To even entertain this idea, we have to look at how our baseline perception works, right? Like, the way you and I are experiencing the world this very second is fundamentally flawed.
It is. And the ancient texts actually introduce a concept for this. It's called santati, which roughly translates to continuity.
Continuity, okay.
The philosophical argument here is that our everyday mind constantly strings together these rapidly occurring distinct moments to fabricate a seamless reality.
So it's tricking us.
Basically, yes. We think we are experiencing this continuous, smooth flow of time, but we are actually experiencing a rapid-fire sequence of discrete, isolated events.
And the sources have this brilliant analogy for this that made the abstract concept so much more tangible for me.
The movie theater one.
Yes. Think about sitting in a movie theater, right?
Okay.
You are totally engrossed in the film, watching cars drive by, people talking, and it all looks perfectly fluid.
Very natural.
But mechanically, it's just 24 or maybe 60 entirely static frames flashing per second on that screen.
Right.
Your visual cortex is actively tricking you. It is smoothing over the blank black gaps between those frames to construct the illusion of continuous motion.
And it has to do that. It is a strict biological necessity.
How so?
Well, think about it. If we constantly perceived the empty gaps between sensory inputs, we wouldn't be able to function. You couldn't react to a predator jumping out of the bushes or even just catch a baseball thrown at you.
Oh, wow. Yeah. We'd be too distracted by the flickering.
Exactly. Our nervous system is optimized for macro-level survival, not for perceiving the microscopic underlying fabric of reality.
That makes total sense. And there's another analogy from the text that hits even closer to home, I think. Picture a fast-spinning ceiling fan.
Oh, yeah, this is a great one.
Like when the power's off, you clearly see 3 or 4 distinct blades, and there's obvious empty physical space between them.
Right, you can see right through it.
But then you turn it on high speed and your eyes just completely fail you.
Yeah.
You perceive this solid, semi-transparent disc. You literally cannot see the gaps that you absolutely know are physically there.
And when we apply that fan analogy to the human mind, the Buddhist perspective argues that your thoughts, your feelings, your very consciousness operates in that exact same way.
It feels like a solid disc.
Exactly. It feels like one continuous, unbroken stream of you. But the Abhidhamma posits that consciousness is actually composed of individual, discrete moments arising and passing away, one after another.
Separated by these unimaginably tiny intervals.
Yes. And Santati is simply the illusion of the solid disk.
Okay, so to bring this back to my earlier pushback, how does a human being actually see the blades of the fan? Because I can't just slow down a movie reel by squinting or, concentrating really hard. There has to be an actual mechanism for breaking that biological illusion.
Right, and this brings us to the actual mechanics of jhana. Because, like we established, it isn't just taking deep breaths and relaxing. In this specific context, entering jhana is about radically increasing the mind's internal sampling rate.
Which, taking a term straight from audio engineering, right?
Right.
Like the number of times per second a microphone captures a discrete piece of digital sound.
That's exactly it. Your baseline sampling rate just walking around every day is low enough that the frames blur into a movie. The fan looks like a disc. But through this rigorous, hyper-focused meditation, a practitioner actively trains their attention away from macroscopic objects.
Like what?
Like the sound of a bird outside, or even the feeling of a whole breath. They narrow their focus down to the most microscopic sensations possible. By stripping away all the worldly hindrances, lethargy, distraction, stress, their mindfulness becomes razor sharp.
So they are exponentially increasing that internal sampling rate.
Yes, and that allows them to pierce right through the illusion of Santati.
It's essentially like they are upgrading their brain software to perceive the individual frames of reality.
That's a good way to put it.
And the claim in the sources is that in these heightened states, the practitioner actually observes the very first mind state arise, perform its specific cognitive function, and completely cease before the second mind state even begins to form.
They see the physical gaps between the fan blades.
Yes. And they supposedly see this happen 1 trillion times in the snap of a finger.
They witness the birth and death of consciousness on a microscopic scale. The mind states aren't just blurring together into a general mood or a fuzzy thought process anymore.
Right.
They are distinct, isolated events flashing in and out of existence with just terrifying speed.
And here's where I get really stuck. If the human mind actually possesses this latent capacity for such an extreme sampling rate, we run into a glaring 21st century problem.
To science problem.
Yes. Why aren't we hooking these jhana practitioners up to modern diagnostic machines? I mean, if this software upgrade is real, it should be the most studied phenomenon in cognitive science right now, right?
You would think so. But the lack of laboratory data actually points to a major historical and ethical roadblock that is inherently built into the tradition itself.
Yeah. Reading through the sources, I found this specific rule in the traditional monastic code, the Vinaya, and honestly, it feels almost too convenient.
Rule against showing off.
Exactly. It explicitly forbids monks from demonstrating what they call Uttari Manusadhamma.
Right, the superhuman states.
Superhuman states, which directly includes these profound jhana states we're talking about. They are strictly not allowed to display these abilities to lay people. And my immediate reaction was, well, this is a built-in trap.
They look like a loophole.
Totally. A loophole designed specifically to evade scientific scrutiny. Like, oh, I have this incredible ability to perceive 1 trillion mind states a second, but darn it, my ancient rulebook says I can't show you.
And viewing it from a modern data-driven perspective, it absolutely looks like an evasion tactic. I mean, how could it not?
Oh, right.
But unpacking the historical context reveals that the rule wasn't established to hide the truth from objective measurement. You have to remember, the Buddha instituted this restriction as a strict quality control measure against charlatans. So preventing the ancient equivalent of grifters. Exactly. If monks were permitted to boast about superhuman mental processing, the potential for grift would be astronomical. Bad actors could easily fake these claims to build personality cults, or just profit off an easily manipulated public. Which makes sense, because we see modern equivalents of that all the time today, completely outside of monastic structures. All the time. But beyond just preventing a societal circus, there is a core philosophical imperative at play here too. The ultimate objective of this tradition is to understand the nature of reality in order to extinguish suffering.
Right.
It is not about accumulating psychic parlor tricks or inflating one's ego or, winning some kind of supernatural talent show.
Okay, I see. So if a practitioner's primary goal is to demonstrate their nanosecond perception just to impress a crowd, or even to impress a panel of modern neuroscientists, they're actively feeding the exact ego that the entire philosophy is trying to dismantle.
Precisely. The very act of showing off contradicts the psychological state required to achieve the observation in the first place. You can't have both.
The unintended consequence for us today, however, is that this ancient ethical rule has effectively turned Jhana into an impenetrable black box.
It really has.
Because materialistic science requires observation, repetition, and independent verification. But we are looking at a phenomenon that strictly forbids public demonstration. It creates this profound clash between first-person empirical experience and third-person objective measurement.
It leaves science at a total impasse. We have an ancient tradition claiming highly reproducible internal data, but it categorically refuses to submit to the external parameters that modern empiricism demands.
Okay, but let's play out the hypothetical for a second. Even if authentic practitioners won't volunteer to go into a lab, what happens when we try to force the issue using the technology we currently have? We possess incredible tools. Why can't current neuroscience, using something like an fMRI machine or high-density EEG, simply capture this trillion times a second birth and death of the mind?
It's a great question, but the limitations of our current technology actually highlight a fundamental biological and philosophical mystery. Let's take the fMRI machine, for example. It measures the hemodynamic response.
Meaning it tracks the blood flow, right?
Right. It tracks the blood flow and oxygen consumption in specific regions of the brain.
But blood flow is incredibly sluggish compared to cognitive processing. I mean, an fMRI takes a few seconds to register a change in blood oxygenation.
Exactly.
If a mind state is arising and ceasing a trillion times a second, measuring it by watching blood flow is it's like trying to measure the speed of a bullet by watching the grass sway in the wind behind it.
That's a perfect analogy.
The biological footprint is just way, way too slow.
The machinery is simply biologically unequipped to handle that kind of frequency. And even if we look at an EEG, which measures electrical signals firing across the scalp, that operates on a scale of milliseconds, not picoseconds.
Right.
Ultimately, these instruments only measure what we call the neural correlates of consciousness.
Meaning they capture the physical events that happen alongside consciousness, but they aren't capturing the consciousness itself.
Exactly. And this leads directly into the philosopher David Chalmers' famous concept, the hard problem of consciousness. Despite mapping all these neural correlates, science still cannot explain how or why physical matter, chemicals, electrical impulses, blood flow, actually translates into a subjective inner experience.
Right, the feeling of it.
Yes, we can track the exact electrical cascade in your visual cortex when you see the color red, but we absolutely cannot measure the qualitative, subjective feeling of redness itself. This qualitative experience is what philosophers call qualia.
So, synthesizing this, the physical tools we have can only measure the object, which is the physical brain, but they fundamentally fail to measure the knower, the subjective mind actually experiencing the qualia.
Right.
It's kind of like trying to measure the melancholy of a sad poem by literally weighing the ink on the paper.
Yes.
You are measuring the physical medium perfectly, but the actual meaning exists in an entirely different immaterial domain.
And that is the absolute crux of the hard problem. If consciousness is arising and ceasing a trillion times a second, that oscillation is happening entirely in the domain of the knower.
The ink weight won't tell you anything about it.
Exactly. The physical brain's blood flow might be confined to normal biological speed limits, but the subjective experience of consciousness might be operating on an entirely different, perhaps immaterial frequency that our physical tools simply cannot touch.
Which puts us in a really strange limbo. Our machines can't measure it, and the tradition won't publicly demonstrate it. Going through the sources, I honestly started wondering if this extreme level of perception is just purely mythological at this point.
Right.
Like, is anyone alive today actually doing this? Because there's a psychological trap mentioned in the text called upadana.
Upadana, yes.
And reading about it, it sounded almost like a meditative hallucination. Like a practitioner's ego just convinces them they've achieved this elite state.
Yeah.
Is that what's happening to the modern people who claim to have reached these profound levels of Jhana?
It's highly likely. The texts, specifically the Visuddhimagga, explicitly warn about this exact danger. Upadana translates roughly to clinging or grasping. So in our modern, hyper-stimulated world, a practitioner might sit down in meditation, experience some kind of unusual physiological sensation, or maybe a visual artifact just from deep concentration, and their ego immediately clings to it.
They think they've unlocked the secrets of the universe.
Right. They falsely equate a strange neural glitch with ultimate enlightenment.
So all the individuals out there writing massive blog posts or shouting from the rooftops about their transcendent jhana experiences, they are highly likely to just be trapped in upadana, essentially fooling themselves.
Very likely. The Visuddhimagga suggests that individuals who have truly cultivated their minds to this razor-sharp sampling rate are vanishingly rare. And crucially, those very few who have actually dismantled their ego enough to achieve true jhana have absolutely no psychological desire to announce it to the world.
Wow. Okay, so this brings us to a really critical realization for the listener. Because if you were listening to this right now, you might be thinking, okay, achieving a trillion frames a second sampling rate is virtually impossible for a normal, modern person bombarded by smartphones and daily stress. And science can't even empirically verify it exists.
Right, it sounds a bit hopeless.
Yeah. Does this mean the phenomenological insights of this entire tradition are completely useless for the average person?
Thankfully, no. The texts actually reveal a fascinating alternative that makes this entire philosophy highly accessible.
Oh, good.
So the intense, almost superhuman meditative absorption of jhana we've been talking about, that is known as Ceto Vimutti. But the Buddha did not mandate this path for everyone. There is an entirely different approach called Sukha Vipassaka.
Sukha Vipassaka.
Yes, which translates to the path of dry insight.
Dry insight. What exactly makes it dry? Like, as opposed to wet?
Well, it is considered dry because it lacks the moisture, meaning the profound blissful tranquility and altered consciousness of deep jhana absorption. The dry insight path does not require retreating to a cave for decades to achieve superhuman sampling rates. It relies purely on cultivating ordinary, everyday mindfulness to observe reality as it actually is.
But how does the dry insight path functionally work if you aren't slowing the movie reel down to see those trillion individual frames?
It works by scaling the observation of santati, that continuity we talked about, down to a macro level that a normal human brain can actually manage.
Okay.
You don't need to witness a trillion mind states ceasing in a picosecond. You only need to clearly witness one macro mind state arising and passing.
Okay, let's ground this in a real-world phenomenological experience so we can really wrap our heads around it. Let's say you're sitting in a meeting at work and you receive a highly critical email from your boss.
A very common scenario.
Right. And anxiety just immediately spikes in your chest. On the dry insight path, instead of being totally consumed by the anxiety and letting it ruin your day, you apply mindfulness to observe it objectively. You just note that the feeling of anxiety has arisen. You observe its physical and mental signature. Maybe your heart rate goes up, your chest gets tight for a few seconds or minutes, and eventually you just watch it naturally fade away.
Exactly. By observing that simple cycle, the arising, persisting, and ceasing of the emotion, you pierce the illusion of continuity on a highly practical level.
Because it didn't last forever.
Right. You gain the direct, experiential wisdom that the ancient texts are pointing toward. The realization that internal suffering is fundamentally impermanent.
You realize it is not a solid disk. The anxiety is just a temporary frame in the movie reel of your day.
Beautifully put.
And more importantly, by watching it come and go, you realize that the anxiety is not intrinsically you. Like, if it were your permanent identity, it wouldn't just evaporate when you finally took a walk or closed your laptop. You learn to detach your sense of self from the passing phenomenon.
And that is the core takeaway of this entire 2,500-year-old framework. It isn't about validating the mathematics of a trillion states per second.
Right.
Whether it's a literal neurobiological metric or just a profound phenomenological metaphor, the objective isn't to win some debate with materialistic reductionists.
Yeah.
The true utility of this knowledge is dismantling the machinery of suffering in your immediate everyday lived experience.
It is about breaking that illusion of santati in your daily emotional life, finding the space between your reactions and realizing you just don't have to be swept away by the continuous flow of it all.
Because honestly, it doesn't matter if your mind ceases 10 times a second or a trillion times a second. What matters is whether your mind in this exact moment is lost in the illusion or aware of the present reality.
That is so powerful. And I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today. We started all of this by exploring the movie reel of your mind and how your brain seamlessly stitches together these static frames to construct the illusion of a solid, permanent reality.
The illusion of the continuous self.
Right. So if our internal lives really are just a rapid-fire sequence of fleeting moments arising and dying, what would it look like tomorrow if you stopped treating your anxiety, your frustration, or your bad moods as your permanent identity? What if the next time you feel completely overwhelmed, you view those feelings merely as passing frames flickering on the screen of your mind? You ask yourself, who is the one watching the screen?